Сайн байцгаана уу хүн үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор компани засаглалын тухай ярихаар холбооны Германы ирсэн профессор ноён Кристиан Штренгер оролцож байна.
Профессор Кристиан Штренгер Герман улсын Лайпциг хотын менежментийн их сургуулийн харьяа компани засаглал судлалын төвийн захирал. Тэрээр компани засаглалаар мэргэшсэн олон улсад нэр хүндтэй эрдэмтэн хүн бөгөөд холбооны бүгд найрамдах Герман улсын компани засаглалын дүрм кодексыг боловсруулах засгийн газрын зөвлөлд байгуулагдсан цагаас хойш 15 жил сонгогдсон гишүүнээр ажиллаж байна. Зах зээлд чиглэсэн өөрийгөө удирдах тогтолцоотой компани үйл ажиллагааны болон хяналтын нийтээр хүлээн зөвшөөрөгдсөн ил тод байдал суурилан зохицуулагдсан хяналттай бие даасан компани засаглалыг байгуулах чиглэлээр ажиллаж байна.
Hello.
Hello.
Nice meeting you. Welcome to the
Great pleasure.
show.
Privilege to be here.
Let's talk about the mission that brought you here.
It was to give Mongolian and German people the Germans who visit here an idea of what I consider important elements of good governance. Good governance is now a safe factor that governs the world and has proven to be the one and only way to improve the running and control of companies. It's very simply the art of good housekeeping at companies and organizations.
We talk about corporate governance, private sector governance, as you said, bringing an order in a house. Why is that important? I mean,
Because
many companies are existing without talking about that.
Yes, but you only can go so far before you will have a real problem. We know this from many companies around the world that were initially having a great run, and then because they made stupid mistakes or people were cooking the books or people were exerting too much pressure on their people, so constructive criticism was no longer possible. That is, for example, the Volkswagen case. Wonderful company, great cars, but they wanted to become number one in the world. And so in order to achieve that, they started cheating on the emission system and told everyone in the company, we don't want to hear your critique. And there are other ways that incentives are being given in a way that then the problem arises because the people cannot make do with the wrong incentives.
See, many people go on the things because there was no problem. They go until that sort of thing is happening. So what you are suggesting is certain kind of instruments that will help an owner or the people to avoid this sort of mistakes down the road.
Right.
What is the most important first step to take that action?
You have to establish a good framework, a good code of behavior that shows everyone working inside the company and the governors, the board members, what is expected from them, how they should behave, who is in charge, who is to do what must be controlled, what should not be done. Insider transactions, related party transactions, all these matters should be clearly set out in the code so people have a clear understanding of the rules that govern the proper functioning of the company. When I came here, I said this country has had a wonderful example of good governance because in the early days this country was governing the world between Asia and Europe for 2 centuries. And without good governance, where everybody knew what he or she had to do and the proper place and the measures, it would never have worked, because these were the times when you had no iPhones. You had to have fantastic logistics, but everybody knew where they were and they behaved appropriately. If they didn't behave, then their life was perhaps short. That is not what we have in today's problem, but if your governance is poor, then you will have a problem in getting financing. Your results will be poorer.
Okay, and you have mentioned about this Genghis Khan time, kind of ruling for 200 years, really without that institutional capacity you cannot do it.
Right.
At that time looks like it was existing.
Yep.
But when we talk about institutions in Mongolia, for example, today, looks like at first sight they are, you have government, parliament, then the ministries, then the companies, then somehow they get together. They are confused in their functions. Well, businesses becoming politicians, making decisions. How to enforce those rules?
Well, that's the key in many emerging market countries, that there are rules, there are laws, there are codes, there are scorecards, and they look very nice in theory, but the practice is so different. And most of the problem is that proper enforcement of all these regulatory matters does not take place. So in the case of Mongolia, you have all the institutions, you have the central bank, you have the Financial Regulatory Commission, you have the stock exchange and other institutions that could do that, but it needs the government and the people to really want it. So enforcement of the proper rules of good governance is quintessential. Without it, everybody will say, "No, yeah, very nice to see it, but not for me."
In terms of our public governance, we have the problem with that enforcement because this judicial system are under impact of this legislative system, these people, and they kind of nominate them as they want.
Yeah.
And they don't much kind of checking balances everything on time. As a result, many even criminal cases are coming out and slowly disappearing in this country because it went so long, so far, and so deep that now they can mutually kept each other hold.
Yeah.
That's the situation today in Mongolia.
Yeah, but that's what you
was
have
the
to,
exit?
you have to break this up. If there's no independent judiciary, then I think the enforcement will not work, because the people who make bad things know they can get away with it either over time or even worse by paying for it, and that is obviously all not welcome. I think this country is not alone with these problems. It is very often the case in many other countries, and that's what we are trying to build. I'm with the IFC in the effort as a private sector advisory group. We're coming, and here the IFC has been in Mongolia, UB, and has established what matters in terms of governance. But now I think the second and the most important step is we have now the rules and the code, but it needs to be applied and enforced.
In terms of World Bank and IFC, this private sector advisory group, looks like they are too diplomatic in terms of these national cases, because I mean, now today this country is in a big debt now, is going in already asking money from these institutions, IMF in particular, but still they keep not doing what they have been promising, because due to many reasons. They have promised a lot of social paradises, many things, and they cannot do any more at the end. So what is that exit here? Is it more or push from these organizations?
Well, that's a very interesting point. In working for this private sector advisory group of the IFC, we come to the countries and can give them ideas how to structure a code, how to run things. But we say very clearly it is the people who themselves want it, and they have to be convinced that the advantage of a good governance system over the longer term is so important for the well-being of the people. Yeah, and
well, we talk about the convincing people. It's about knowledge, understanding of
yes.
the people. But in a developing country like Mongolia, people though they can read, etc., they're literate,
yeah,
but not necessarily fully understand how does the government function. How do you teach them the school in Germany, for example,
Yep.
In the schools, the economy, what does the government means?
Well, the government is learning themselves that it is so important that people study how the economy works and proper governance at a stage of when they are between 15 and 20. Yeah, so that's the first step. The second step is that in the universities there's proper teaching of governance, not only of law, but also governance, and governance in connection with ethics. Because in the end, the royal merchant principle that is all over the place in these governance rules must also be taught with a proper background. And that means people have to be convinced that good ethical behavior is so important, and only then people will see the wisdom of these rules really being applied and enforced.
You have been establishing this government commission, German Corporate Governance Code. What is this about, and why you have created it?
Well, Germans take all these things very serious and take quite some time to do it properly. So first, the German Chancellor, when he observed that so many companies were deficient in their governance system, said, okay, we will have a commission from the government, all non-political figures, only experts. That's again the key of the whole thing. You have to bring the people who know to build these codes. And that was the idea, to build a code. And once the code was built, then a year later, an official government commission was appointed, again appointed by the Ministry of Justice, but nobody from the political side. So it's only experts from companies, from academy, from investors, and who really set up the rules in detail and see that there is a development, because corporate governance is never like a law set in stone forever.
Yes.
Corporate governance is a moving target.
What is the role of the commission, and who are there inside?
The commission are again these experts that are non-political figures.
Okay, a particular amount of people elected, selected, or
12 people, and they are again from academy, from accountancy, from audit people. There are people from the investor side, from companies, many, and so on. So,
and yet it's called government commission, not
because it's
non-government
appointed,
commission.
Yeah, but it's appointed by the government.
Okay,
Yeah.
appointed. Do they have a salary?
No, they work
no
pro bono.
Okay, pro bono.
It's only the traveling costs and so on. It's an honor to be on this commission. And people want to be there.
For how many years one is kind of nominated?
Well, that varies. I've been there since the foundation.
15 years.
15 years.
2001,
nearly
2016,
too long.
up to this year.
But I've been before even the official work on this code started, I had a private initiative.
Have you, since you were there for 15 years, do you feel that you have achieved the goal you made 15 years ago?
Yeah, I think we have achieved most of what we thought was necessary. First, better understanding who has to do what. Germany has a dual board system. We have a supervisory board that is to supervise and control, sort of steady go and not get into the business. And then we have the management board that is appointed by the supervisory board, and the management board has to do the business. They are in charge of running the business, but all major decisions have to be approved by the supervisory board.
Well, and with the bank, for example, the bank has supervisory board and board of directors.
Yeah.
Then the CEO, who will work under this board of directors, or is this?
No.
What is that?
You don't. You have two boards. One is the supervisory board that appoints the management board, and the CEO is part of the management board.
You have been working for Deutsche Bank. You are the asset manager. You have been also working for the large private bank, Merck, Finch and Co. in Munich.
Yeah.
And also you have been the corporate finance and asset management, New York, Brown Brothers,
Yeah.
right?
And Warburgs in London.
Deutsche
all
Bank, yes, London, New York.
Yeah.
So all these banks have the same system, advisory board and the managing board.
Supervisory board and
Supervisory.
management board. Yes, if they are German based.
I see. By
see-
law.
Yeah.
By law, okay.
Yeah, the German company law prescribes that. In the United States or UK, many other countries, you have a unitary board of executives and non-executives.
Yes.
So we think that splitting the roles into the supervisory board and the management board makes good sense, because you have a clear mandate for the two boards. One is to supervise and control, and the other one has to manage. So there's no meddling around.
In Mongolia, for example, banks have a board of directors who are representing the shareholders. And then you have, if we were Mongolian, I mean, if this Mongolian company, German company, then they need to have a supervisory board, SI,
Yeah.
which will consist of whom? These are reps of shareholders are here.
Yeah.
Who are there? What is their role, and how long they are elected or selected, and who are paying for that?
Yeah. Well, that's maybe a little too complicated.
I see.
Yeah.
Sounds very complicated.
Yes.
And how do you manage in Germany then?
Well, we do, because we have clear rule. The supervisory board cannot run the company.
I see. So
See, that's one of the things that I was told is a problem here. The board quite often does the day-to-day business,
yes,
and that is the wrong approach. You have to have a management group, management board that runs the company and can tell the supervisory board, don't get into our business. We are in charge of business, and if you don't like us, how we do the business, you can get rid of us. But until you do that, don't get involved into the company's
so then
management.
what do they do? They set up certain measures, right, to control the other part.
Well, that's okay. They can say, okay, if you management board want to build a new factory or expand abroad, we need, as supervisors, we need to agree to that. But first, it's for management to come up with a plan that is good enough so the supervisory board can say, yes, go ahead. And then it's again the management board to execute it.
Who are they are consisting of, this supervisory board?
Well, you have to have proper directors, maybe big shareholder, and you have to have people that really understand the business in general. So, and you have to have sufficient amount of independent people. not only formally independent, quite often you find in boards all over the world people that are formally independent, but they don't understand the business. Or they are always the friend in the golf club or something else. And that may be formally independent, but not in real.
Actually independent.
Independence in mind is the big point.
All right, that means he has first no business interest, no shares.
Well, can have shares, that's not the problem, up to a certain level. But
like 1%?
Maybe,
5?
Yeah.
Okay, 1%.
It would be a good thing if they have some shares, because then they're thinking more in the direction of the company.
Yes. Does it give you any advantage? Do you feel after so many years that you are more competitive because of that?
I think German competitiveness is not only because of the dual board system, but we think it makes good sense that the roles are so clearly divided. And what you see now around the world is that also the one board system, where you have executives and non-executives, is developing into two boards de facto, because the non-executives are now solely in charge of the so-called committees, which are so essential to really run a board properly. Audit committee, compensation committee, risk management committee, very important committees, because in Germany, for example, boards are 20 people, and you can't run a board if you always have 20 people around. The experts that know about something should be in the committees. So audit committee, key. And in these committees, it's only non-executive independent directors, and they have to have the knowledge of what they talk about.
Since you were working in a capital market system for many years, and you particularly developed this code in a country like Mongolia, where we have only dominant player in this market, financial market, is monetary market, money market, banks. And we don't have, very tiny fraction of capital market, very small capital market, stock exchange, though it is existing. And we cannot shift somehow all these markets to this part, capital market. What is the most important thing to develop a capital market in any country?
To understand that if you have the proper prerequisites for a functioning capital market, the stock exchange, for equity financing, which is so vital, then you have to abide by the key components, which are transparency, absence of conflicts of interest,
well, that
proper audit, proper enforcement. If these things are there, then the confidence of the investors that was starting to come here in 2011 and 12, Mongolia was a nearly hot market for emerging countries. But then the people left because of other reasons, but also because they said the governance isn't sort of convincing enough. We think that our interests are not properly looked after, and that's when they leave, because big investors can invest wherever they want around the world. And if they feel that their interest is not properly protected, then they will say, okay, either no money or at much higher cost. This country has, I think, lately borrowed in US dollars at rates of 10%.
Yes.
the rate for 10-year Treasury paper of the United States in dollars is now 1.2%. And that's why everybody, including the government and the people who are important in the country, should say, we cannot afford this. We must change.
And now we are coming to this point where we cannot tolerate anymore the market, the people. Now it's too much debt burden, and the big concern is now, I mean, I would like to ask a question that of concern of everybody today. Mongolia's people, in particular banks, are very afraid of having international bank come into Mongolia. There are requests, and they say, oh, it's too small market, we should defend the market. How do you see any nation market economic nation to have foreign banks inside of the country, that commercial banks? What do you think? Is it that bad or it's okay?
I think it's all a measure of control, right? So maybe twofold. You would allow the one or the other foreign bank, and you may want to have investors participate in Mongolian banks with cooperation agreements. So it is not good to say, oh, we don't want to have any foreign influence. The world has become bigger. You cannot say, well, we have to do it all ourselves. So without exchange, it will not sort of go forward. I understand that banking is such a vulnerable thing. So therefore, it would be sensible to say, okay, in the Mongolian banking sector, we will only have foreign interest to a maximum of maybe 1/3. So you have control over, and that means you will admit the one or the other foreign bank. The countries are well known where I think the biggest fear is, and you could also do it by saying, okay, these foreign institutions can acquire a stake in a Mongolian bank, and that would be ideal because then there would also be a transfer of knowledge and transfer of governance behavior.
Well, it's an interesting solution, having a stake in Mongolian commercial bank. Dr. Strenger, the topic is, of course, it's endless, and the deeper you go, you can go more horizons, right, to see.
Sure.
And obviously, you are going to have a lecture in Mongolia, and you will meet substantial amount of economic players in the country. And I would like to thank you for coming to Mongolia, to sharing your knowledge and experiences. And I hope it will give more confidence to the market, to the players, based on the best practices you will share with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much yourself. It was a pleasure to be here, and I'm convinced that this country can regain some of its pride that was there some time ago.
Well, that's all we talk about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. За хүн төлөвчтэй өнөөдөр манай дефакто нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Холбооны Германы профессор Кристиан Штренгер оролцож компани засаглалын тухай санал бодлоо солилцлоо. Их баярлалаа.